Imagine this. You wake up one morning, and the person next to you, someone who has slept beside you for years, is not breathing. No hospitals. No doctors. No phone to call anyone. Just you, a body, and a question that every human before you has had to answer. What do you do now? This isn't a hypothetical. This happened to every single one of your ancestors, over and over again, for hundreds of thousands of years. And the answer they came up with didn't just bury a body. It built the foundation of everything we now call being human. Stick around, because the way ancient humans handled death explains something strange about you, something you do today, without even realizing where it came from. Before we get to the rituals, we need to ask a much stranger question first. Did early humans even care when someone died? For a long time, scientists assumed the answer was no. Early hominins, the ancestors before modern humans, were thought to treat death the same way animals do. A herd of elephants might sniff a dead companion, linger for a moment, and then move on. Survival mode. No ceremony, no meaning. But then archaeologists found something that broke that assumption completely. In a cave system in South Africa, deep underground, in a chamber that could only be reached by squeezing through narrow tunnels in complete darkness, researchers found the remains of at least 15 individuals of a species called Homo naledi. No tools nearby. No signs anyone lived there. No natural way for bodies to end up there by accident. While scientists are still fiercely debating it, the leading, and most haunting, theory is that someone carried them there. On purpose. Repeatedly, into a place so difficult to reach that it strongly suggests it was intentional. That single discovery rewired how we think about early humans. It suggested that somewhere, hundreds of thousands of years ago, a species with a brain roughly a third the size of ours had already developed the idea that a body, after death, deserved to go somewhere specific. Not because it made survival easier. Not because it kept predators away, but possibly, and this is the part that still gives researchers chills, because it meant something. That's the moment death stopped being just biology, and started being human. Fast forward roughly 100,000 years, to a cave in what is now Israel, called Kafse. Here, archaeologists found something even more specific, a burial. A real one. A body placed deliberately in a shallow pit, arranged in a position, with deer antlers placed carefully across the chest. Think about the layers of decision-making that had to happen for this to exist. Someone had to decide the body should not simply be left where it fell. Someone had to dig, with nothing but stone tools and bare hands, a space for it. Someone had to choose antlers, carry them, and place them just so. Someone had to agree, as a group, that this mattered enough to do. This wasn't about hygiene. Rotting bodies do attract predators and disease, sure, but you don't need antlers on a chest to solve that problem. You just need distance. The antlers are the tell. The antlers mean meaning. And once you find meaning at a grave, you find something else hiding right behind it, grief. Here's where it gets personal. Because if ancient humans grieved, it wasn't some abstract, distant emotion. It looked a lot like what you would recognize today. At a site called Sungir in Russia, dated to around 34,000 years ago, archaeologists uncovered the graves of two children, a boy around 12 or 13, and a girl around 9 or 10, buried head to head. Their bodies were covered in roughly 10,000 ivory beads each. Do the math on that for a second. Each bead, made from mammoth ivory, has been estimated to take up to an hour to carve by hand using stone tools. 10,000 beads per child. That's potentially years, not days, years of collective labor poured into preparing these two children for burial. This wasn't a quick goodbye. This was a community stopping everything, for possibly the equivalent of a lifetime of work, to say, these two mattered, and we are not going to let their deaths pass without proof that they were loved. And it wasn't just children. Across dozens of Ice Age burial sites in Europe and Asia, researchers have found bodies stained with red ochre, a natural pigment ground from iron-rich rock. Not just sprinkled. Sometimes the body was coated in it, head to foot. Nobody knows for certain why ochre specifically. But one leading theory is chilling in its simplicity: red is the color of blood, the color of life. Painting a dead body red may have been an attempt to symbolically return life to it, a plea, in pigment, that death could somehow be undone. If that theory is right, it means somewhere around 30,000 years ago, a parent knelt beside their dead child with a handful of red powder and tried, the only way they knew how, to bring them back. That is not so different from what you would feel today. But grief wasn't the only thing driving these rituals. There was something else, running underneath it: fear. Not fear of death itself, fear of what death might do if it wasn't handled correctly. In many ancient burial sites, bodies have been found in strange, deliberate positions. Knees pulled tightly to the chest in a fetal curl. Hands bound. Heavy stones placed directly on top of the torso or the head. At first, some researchers assumed this was just practical. A curled body takes up less space to bury. But at certain sites, the stones are placed in a way that seems less about space, and more about something else entirely, keeping the body down. There's a theory, supported by burial patterns found across multiple ancient cultures on different continents, that some early humans feared the dead could return. Not as ghosts in the way we think of them today, necessarily, but as some kind of lingering presence that, if not properly contained, might bring sickness, bad luck, or worse, try to take someone else with it. So the ritual wasn't only about honoring the dead. It was about controlling them. Bind the hands so they can't reach out. Weigh down the chest so they can't rise. Bury them facing away from the village, so whatever essence remained wouldn't find its way back home. Think about that the next time you walk past a modern cemetery and notice something odd. In many cultures, graves still face a specific direction. Coffins are still sealed. Bodies are still, in a sense, contained. You inherited that instinct. You just don't remember where it came from. Here's the part that connects everything back to you, right now, in a way you might not expect. Before death rituals, there is very little archaeological evidence of large groups of early humans doing anything together purely for symbolic reasons. Hunting, sure. Sheltering, sure. But those are survival tasks. Burial is different. Burial is the first known example of humans organizing collective behavior around something that has zero survival benefit. You don't need 10,000 hand-carved beads to keep predators away from a body. You don't need days of communal mourning to stop disease from spreading. The only reason to do it is because, somewhere along the way, humans developed the capacity to believe that a life, even after it ends, still matters enough to interrupt everything else. That single shift may be one of the earliest known appearances of something researchers call collective meaning-making, the ability of a group to agree, without needing to say it out loud, that something is sacred. Funerals may have been the first shared ritual humans ever built together. Before religion had a name. Before there were temples, or priests, or holy texts. There was a body, a hole in the ground, and a group of people who decided, together, that this moment deserved more than silence. Every funeral you've ever attended, every wake, every memorial, every moment of collective silence for someone who is gone, not every death got this treatment, though. And this is where the story gets darker. Archaeological evidence suggests that during particularly harsh periods, famine, disease outbreaks, brutal winters, burial practices became rushed, or disappeared almost entirely. Bodies from these periods are sometimes found with none of the careful positioning, none of the ochre, none of the grave goods. Just a body, placed quickly, and left. This tells us something important. Elaborate death rituals were, in some sense, a luxury. They required time, resources, and enough stability that a community could afford to stop and mourn instead of immediately focusing on survival. When times were good, humans invested enormous effort into honoring the dead. When times were desperate, that effort collapsed almost immediately, not because people cared less, but because they simply couldn't afford to care in the same way. Something quietly devastating about that. It means grief, even for our earliest ancestors, was something that had to compete with survival. And sometimes, survival won, whether anyone wanted it to or not. If you've ever felt guilty for not being able to properly mourn someone because life simply didn't give you the time, that feeling is not new. It is, in a strange way, one of the oldest human experiences there is. Here's a detail that surprises most people. Not every ancient culture buried their dead, and left them buried. In several sites across Europe and the Middle East, archaeologists have found something stranger: skulls that were removed from bodies after burial, sometimes years later, and kept. At a site called Jericho, in the West Bank, dating back roughly 9,500 years, researchers uncovered human skulls that had been plastered over with clay, carefully shaped to recreate facial features, with shells inserted where the eyes would be. In other words, someone dug up a loved one's skull and rebuilt their face. Nobody knows exactly why. Maybe it was a way to keep the presence of an ancestor close, a physical object the family could keep in the home. Maybe it was tied to early ancestor worship, a belief that the dead could still watch over, protect, or guide the living if they remained nearby. Either way, it tells us something remarkable. At some point, ancient humans stopped just fearing the dead, or simply mourning them, and started wanting to keep them. Not their body, necessarily, but their face, their presence. Something to hold on to. If you've ever kept a photo of someone you lost on your wall, or carried a small object that belonged to them, you are doing, in a much gentler way, exactly what someone in Jericho did 9,500 years ago with clay and shells. So, what did ancient humans actually do when someone died? They dug. They painted bodies red, hoping color could undo what death had done. They bound hands and weighed down chests, afraid of what might come back. They spent what might have been years crafting 10,000 beads for 2 children who never got to grow up. They rebuilt the faces of the people they couldn't let go of. And when they had no time at all, they buried quickly, and carried the guilt of an unfinished goodbye, the same guilt you might carry today. None of this was about biology. Rotting bodies don't need beads. Disease doesn't care about clay faces. This was about something else entirely, the exact same thing driving you when you visit a grave, keep an old photograph, or go quiet for a moment when someone's name comes up. It was never really about the body. It was about refusing to let a person disappear completely. And that instinct, the one that made a hominin crawl through a pitch-black tunnel to lay a body to rest, the one that made a parent grind red stone into powder for a child who would never wake up, that instinct didn't go extinct. It's still in you. Right now. Waiting for the next time you need it. If this made you see funerals differently, you're not alone. Turns out, we've been asking the same question for over 300,000 years. What do you think ochre was really for, mourning, magic, or something else? Drop your theory below.